fascination with the paranormal, the afterlife, and things that go bump in the night has existed for centuries. There are even hieroglyphics depicting evidence as such. What has changed, for the better I think, is the acceptance of those who have experienced things in this realm. People who have experienced things they cannot explain has been on the rise for years. Some people think it is because of a lack of religion, an example of hell on earth. And others, like myself, think that this is probably the way it has always been. The only difference now is people are less and less worried about sharing their experiences with others. Enjoy. My house was built in 1904. A single family home, wood frame setting on a concrete block foundation. I've been living here for about 12 years. Of all the weird things that my siblings and I have seen or heard in this house, there is one event that is my favorite. This one happened to my brother. About 10 years ago, he and his best friends had started a garage band playing mostly Spanish rock. His friends could only get together on Sunday afternoons. They would practice into the early evening and usually call it quits by 8 p.m. This was the time I usually showed up and went to bed because I worked the graveyard shift. This happened in late fall, so the days were getting shorter. They had just finished a long session when the decision to head to someone else's house came up. My brother handed his car keys to his buddy so they could load up the equipment. Everyone had filed out of the basement. The tricky part was that they needed to walk all the way to the back of the basement, up the back stairs, through the kitchen doorway, down the hallway, into the living room, and out the front door. Everyone was outside sitting in my brother's truck, waiting for him. My brother was walking back up the stairs when he remembered that he had left his pancakes in a to-go container sitting on a speaker in the basement. He made the decision to go back. This is when, out of the corner of his eye, he sees a shadowy figure. This feeling of dread and uneasiness washed over him. We had been taught that if you are in the presence of a spirit or ghost and you feel a bad vibe, to say a quick prayer or cuss at it. My brother chose the latter. He basically just said, "Hey, fuck you. I don't have time for this shit." My brother started to walk to the back of the basement and briskly walk up the stairs, closing doors and turning off lights as he was walking out. The last switch is on the opposite side of the front door. Luckily, the door was open, and the light from the street lamp was flooding the living room. My brother said he felt something at his back, but at no point did he turn around. He flicked the last switch and the living room went dark. As he stepped out, closing the door behind him, jogged down the porch steps, and closed the gap between himself and his friend-laden truck. He kind of smiled to himself, thought things over in his head, mad at himself for spooking out when there was no reason. He climbed into the driver's side of the truck, and as he pulled out of the driveway, his friends asked, "Hey, wait, what about your brother? Isn't he coming with us?" My brother said, "What do you mean?" "He went to work early tonight and he was already gone. Do you see his car anywhere?" They then asked, "So then who was walking behind you when you were leaving the house?" A friend and a few of his college buddies were going on a ghost hunt and had heard about some graveyard where children were murdered by their mother and had been buried. The graveyard was located off of the main road, so my friend parked his car on the side of the road, and the group of 5 to 7 people, I believe, got out and followed the small path through the woods for a couple of minutes to get to the graveyard. Once there, nothing exciting happened for the first 10 minutes or so. They got bored, and being typical inebriated college students, started taunting the ghost of the mother. This continued for a few minutes before they got tired and decided to go back to the car. Once back at the car, my friend tried opening the handle without unlocking the car. He hadn't locked it in the first place, but found it locked. He chalked it up to bad memory. The group drove home, laughing and talking like normal. After he dropped off everyone else, he went back to his own house. He got home at the same time as one of his other roommates, who stopped and waited for him to pull in. The roommate had his phone out and shined the light into his window when his friend pulled in as a joke. What he saw were tiny, baby-sized handprints all over the windows. As soon as my friend got out, he went into the house without saying a word to the roommate. The roommate, confused, went back to the car and tried to rub one of the handprints off. The problem: the handprints were on the inside of the car. I was driving home with a friend from a tournament we had gone to about 2 or 3 hours away from home. The entire weekend, it had been raining and storming very hard. A lot of roads were flooded. Some were gone. Needless to say, we had to reroute. We ended up going through a few side towns and back roads that were a lot higher elevation from the other bodies of water. We were driving through one small town, and I was navigating with the GPS in the car. I would glance at it every once in a while, but I was also paying attention to what was going on outside of the car, as it was raining really hard. The GPS directed us onto a road that connected with a main road. We were driving on it just fine, when suddenly my buddy slams on the brakes. We were suddenly in the middle of a graveyard, and the road just ends. And then show my buddy that the road continues straight on, and straight back the way we came, according to the GPS screen. He shrugs, turns around, and then we start back the way we came. We had driven on the road for the last 15 miles or so, directly through a town, and on into the countryside before we encountered the graveyard. On the way back, we made 5 or 6 turns within this graveyard, through which we had just come on a straight road that also suddenly spanned back a mile or so, before finally getting back onto the straight road that we thought we were on before. I looked at the GPS again, and it was rerouting. When it finished, the route wanted us to make a U-turn and continue on for 10 miles. We both turned around in our seats to confirm that we indeed had just driven through a huge graveyard with many twists and turns in the road, leading right back into it. We saw the road dead-ended into a small graveyard. We immediately drove back into the town opposite direction of the graveyard and took a different route home. My grandmother is in a nursing home after suffering a stroke a few months ago. Mentally, she is all there. However, her one side is partially paralyzed, and she is in rehab in the nursing home. She's been weakened by the relative lack of activity, though. On Sunday, as we were getting ready to go visit her first thing in the morning as we always do, we got a call from the family of her old best friend. The friend had moved to Florida about 10 years ago, and they had gradually lost touch, save for a Christmas card every now and then. The friend had just died very early that morning, and they were calling to inform us of her death. When we got to the nursing home, we signed in and noticed we were the first visitors of the day. We went to my grandmother's room. In there We have a little visitor's book for people to sign in to her room, so we know who has visited her. No one had signed in since Saturday morning. As we walked into her room, she exclaimed, "Oh my, so many visitors this morning." We asked what she meant. She replied that she had gotten a visit from an old friend that morning, the friend from Florida who had just passed away. She had told my grandmother that she was going away for a while, not to worry, that she would be watching out for her, and that they would see each other again. My grandmother also remarked at how healthy she looked. I've never had chills run down my spine like that before. Later, I asked if anyone had been to my grandmother's room that morning, and the staff said no. We also asked if she received any phone calls. Again, they said no. I personally called the family of the friend in Florida to offer my condolences and ask if they had called anyone else around the area. They said we were the only ones they had called from around here, and the only reason they had called us is because they thought that my grandmother still lived with us. They had no idea until I told them that she was in a nursing home. I know it's in the realm of reality that she could have simply dreamed it, but the chances of her having a dream like that, with that sort of message on the very morning after her friend died, are so remote that it gives me chills. My brother once lived in a flat in downtown Mount Clemens, Michigan. The Clem was known to be a hot spot for baths back in the Depression era and was booming with activity. Nowadays, it has some run-down parts. This is where my brother rented his flat. It was a giant old raggedy house, which was now separated into multiple odd apartments. Long story short, he always admitted to odd experiences. Cupboard doors opening, things missing. But one peculiar oddity was that he always had missing underwear from his drawer. He admitted that he thought his house was haunted and that the ghost had a crush on him. Never anything violent or disturbing, just odd things. Later on, he starts dating his future ex-wife. She starts coming around, and he notices that the oddities begin to increase. New oddities begin to occur. His girlfriend would always find her shoes outside. She'd always comment to my brother to stop putting her shoes outside. He had an idea of why, but he didn't want to frighten her. Besides, it wasn't hurting anyone, right? Things started getting worse. He comes home from work, and his girlfriend was staying there while he was gone. She claims that the stove burner kept lighting itself. She'd walk into the kitchen, and it would be lit. She'd turn it off, and it would be lit again. One night, my brother woke up in the middle of the night and saw his girlfriend sitting at the end of the bed. But he didn't just see her. He felt her near his feet, staring at him. He calls out for her to come back to bed. She doesn't respond. So he calls out louder, telling her to come to bed and asking her what's wrong. His girlfriend then asks what he's doing. He turns, and she's sleeping next to him. He turns back, and no one is at the end of the bed. Now he's freaked out, but he doesn't want to scare his girlfriend from coming over. A few nights later, they're both sleeping, and he wakes up to his girlfriend screaming. He looks over, and she's sleeping, but thrashing around holding onto her neck. He doesn't see anything, so he starts yelling and shaking her to wake her up. After a few shakes, she wakes up crying and terrified. She starts telling my brother about how real her dream felt, that a woman was strangling her, telling her to get out, that she doesn't belong there and to leave her man alone. Her neck had red marks on it, possibly from herself, but they believed it to be from something else. My brother then comes clean with her. They decide to do some research and find out that the address that they live in was an old brothel that the rich bathers used to stay in. My brother moved a few weeks later, but his girlfriend never came back there to stay the night, and he never experienced anything aggressive. When you hear a sound that you cannot explain, will you simply dismiss it? What about that thing you just saw out of the corner of your eye? Or the unexplained drop in temperature on a hot summer day? Or will you appreciate that possibly there is more to life than we can truly yet understand? If you have a story you would like to see featured here, please email me at DuchessDark676@gmail.com. See you next time.